Well, the topic of today's discussion is the March 24th London protests and the coming war between individualism and global collectivism. Yesterday, on April 24th, somewhere between 100,000 and 500,000 protesters assembled in London, England to stop forced vaccinations, the lockdowns, and vaccine passports. And of course, those of us that don't want the vaccines seen forced vaccinations and vaccine passports as basically medical rape. And there was no coverage by corporate media. The George Floyd riots get covered with just 1,000 looters per riot. This may have been a Woodstock-level event. Woodstock had 500,000 participants. Obviously, corporate media is censoring the growing worldwide anti-globalist movement. It may be the largest singular anti-globalist protest to date on planet Earth. From a larger perspective, what you're seeing is a growing worldwide anti-globalist movement. In 2008, there was a forced global rollout of smart meters. In 2019, there was a forced global rollout of 5G antennas. And in 2021, we're in the midst of a global forced agenda to push corporate censorship of anti-globalist viewpoints, forced vaccinations, and vaccine passports, along with the lockdowns. What these three milestones have in common is the fact that, one, individual citizens are left powerless to stop these agendas, and two, such things cannot occur unless they are orchestrated at a global level by governments, corporations, non-government organizations, etc. And thankfully, the good people of planet Earth have finally had enough. I started finding myself censored by big tech in 2019, when I believe but cannot prove that Congresswoman Debbie Dingell had me removed from one of the largest Stop 5G groups on Facebook. Since then, I am increasingly suspended from Facebook, and YouTube has removed a number of my videos. To be clear, this is not censorship of conservative voices, but rather of anti-globalist voices, and I am a proud anti-globalist. And corporate media refuses to acknowledge that obvious fact. I am but a small fish. But literally thousands of anti-globalist groups and content producers have been censored or eliminated on all big tech platforms. And it gets worse by the day. I am very knowledgeable in many subjects and apparently am now seen as a threat to the globalists and their agenda. We just learned days ago the U.S. government is now tracking anti-globalist protests. I'm going to read part of this article. The law enforcement arm of the U.S. Postal Service has been quietly running a program that tracks and collects American social media posts, including those about planned protests, according to a document obtained by Yahoo News. The details of the surveillance effort known as ICOP, or the Internet Covert Operations Program, have not previously been made public. Analysts with the United States Postal Inspection Service, Internet Covert Operations Program, ICOP, monitored significant activity regarding planned protests occurring internationally and domestically on March 20th, 2021. Says the March 16th government bulletin, marked as law enforcement sensitive and distributed through the Department of Homeland Security fusion centers. Locations and times have been identified for these protests, which are being distributed online across multiple media platforms to include right-wing leaning Parler and Telegram accounts. When contacted by Yahoo News, civil liberties experts expressed alarm at the Postal Service surveillance program. Quote, "It's a mystery," said University of Chicago law professor Jeffrey Stone, whom President Barack Obama appointed to review the National Security Agency's block data collection in the wake of the Snowden leaks. Quote, "I don't understand why the government would go to the Postal Service for examining the internet for security issues." Why the post office would now move into social media surveillance, which would appear to have little to do with mail deliveries, is unclear. Quote, "This seems a little bizarre," agreed Rachel Levinson Waldman, Deputy Director of the Brennan Center for Justice and National Security. Quote, "Based on the very minimal information that's available online, it appears that ICOP is meant to root out misuse of the postal system by online actors, which doesn't seem to encompass what's going on here. It's not at all clear why their mandate would include monitoring of social media that's unrelated to the use of the postal system." Levinson Waldman also questioned the legal authority to monitor social activity. Quote, "If individuals they're monitoring are carrying out or planning criminal activity, that should be the purview of the FBI," she said. "If they're simply engaging in lawfully protected speech, even if it's odious or objectionable, then monitoring them on that basis raises serious constitutional concerns." Well, no shit, Sherlock. A number of groups were expected to gather in cities around the globe on March 20th, 2021, as part of a worldwide rally for freedom and democracy to protest everything from lockdown measures to 5G. I'll try to include the full article. It's called "The Postal Service is Running a Covert Operation That Monitors Americans' Social Media Posts." So to be clear and concise, our own government is now subverting our free speech, which reminds me of a quote from our first president, George Washington. "If freedom of speech is taken away, then dumb and silent we may be led, like sheep to the slaughter." And it is seeming like this is the direction we're going. Like my grandfather's Scottish brother, Washington was a good 33-degree Mason. In my view, he was probably smarter than either Franklin or Jefferson. Biden and Camel Toe Harris, in comparison, are but useful idiots for the globalists and their agenda. We are now confronted with the greatest threat to humanity in the last 10,000 years, when human civilization reassembled after the great floods that wiped out most of human population. First, there was agriculture, which allowed humans to diversify labor to more than merely growing food. This led to city-states and hierarchies where a powerful few gained immense power. 10,000 years later, we're on the cusp of a fourth industrial revolution, the Internet of all things, and the digital control of all humans by an exceedingly small number of rich technocrats. At no time in human history, spanning over 300,000 years, has the collective will of these oligarchs so threatened the individual inalienable rights of average humans. This silent war will determine whether we are forced to accept global collectivism, where individual rights will mean nothing, or whether we retain our individual inalienable rights. In essence, this is a war between collectivism and individualism. The issues actually go well beyond forced vaccinations, vaccine passes, and the global lockdown. On March 20th, in fact, there were 44 demonstrations in dozens of countries that are also behind the Worldwide Anti-Globalist Movement. And it actually began with a global protest against 5G on January 25th, 2020. What these events all have in common is a growing resistance to the establishment of a global government where we, the people, will be relegated to the status of farm animals. What I see occurring is far worse than what Orwell predicted in his book 94. It is much more reminiscent of his book Animal Farm, because if the government can force adults to get vaccinated, we are being treated like animals. Tucker Carlson tonight often starts the show saying he is the sworn enemy of lying, pomposity, smugness, and groupthink. I'm beginning to question that. Corporate media, including Tucker Carlson, the supposed supporter of individual rights, has consistently failed to cover any of these events. And as much as I like Tucker, I do have to consider whether he is constrained in what he can cover, or whether he's actually just a controlled opposition to push forward a globalist agenda. I mean, the guy's making $6 million a year. In any case, he's not actually reporting to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And we are at a crossroad where humanity needs to fully understand what's going on. Anything less is just a lie. And his refusal to cover this growing worldwide anti-globalist movement does seem to indicate he is just cleverly lying to us all. I'm just calling it as I see it. Tucker often has Dr. Mark Siegel on his show. He is nothing but a paid shill for Big Pharma, 5G, and other globalist agendas. Recently, on March 2nd, Mark Siegel told Tucker that smoking marijuana is the biggest culprit of all for falling sperm counts, and not the endocrine disrupting chemicals making their way into our food and water supplies. And Tucker went right along with it. I'm going to include a link to that in the notes. But it should be no surprise to anybody. Fox and all corporate media get significant revenue from Big Pharma, and their boards of directors are all in lockstep with a globalist agenda that can easily be understood by studying the United Nations Agenda 21, Agenda 2030, and their Sustainable Development Goals. You can also find the same thing in the Great Reset of the World Economic Forum, which does the thing at Davos, or in AOC's Green New Deal. It's all the same thing. The leaders of most first world nations are also in lockstep with this globalist agenda. Boris Johnson from England, Macron from France, Merkel from Germany, and of course, the dumb idiot we have as President Joe Biden of the United States. Corporate media also failed to connect the dots when candidate Biden talked incessantly about Build Back Better, both during his campaign and during the four months of his presidency. In fact, all these leaders have been talking about building back better since the spring of 2020. It is actually the slogan of Klaus Schwab in the World Economic Forum, who has been advocating for a great reset where by 2030 you won't own anything but you'll be happy. Oh yeah, I can see how that's going to work out. Since Biden got into office, he seems intent on destroying the U.S. economy. He's pushing the globalist agenda through forced vaccinations. He wants vaccine passports. He's destroying our energy infrastructure and opening our borders to illegal immigrants at a time when millions of legal citizens remain jobless and millions of bars and restaurants are going out of business. And as I say, the planks are all the same. They're all about transitioning to a global government, which is essentially going to be global slavery. These actions and his climate change agenda, which is part of Agenda 21, are all planks of the globalist agenda. And there really is no anthropogenic climate change. That would be human climate change. All climate change is due to terrestrial events. Humans have very little effect, and you could spend all the tea in China and you're not going to affect it. I mean, the experts have told us this. The globalist agenda has many names. The UN's Agenda 21, the UN's Agenda 2030, the Great Reset, the Green New Deal pushed by AOC, who's an idiot. If you study these programs, you'll find they all basically are calling for the same thing: global government. I think that's enough for today, so I'm going to stop talking. But before I do, I want to share some planks for an anti-globalist agenda that I surely hope is fully embraced by all future anti-globalist protests I began this with the global Stop 5G protest last January. And then I'm going to append a 10-minute video, if I can, highlighting all 44 globalist protests from March 20th, 2021. And these things got no coverage, not in corporate media, not by Tucker Carlson, not by anybody. They don't want us to rise up. And I'll put a lot of this stuff, I'll put some additional things when you click on show more and read through the comments. I'll just end by saying this, and I've said this a million times. If we are to prevail, all of us is all we need. We all have to get involved in whatever way we can. Because once they got this thing done, once they force us to get vaccinated, once they force these vaccine passports, which is nothing more than the exact same thing that China is doing, it's going to be a credit system. And once they got this, you basically aren't going to be able to work or do anything else. I mean, essentially, and I'm a secularist, but I like studying religious texts. And, you know, this is the mark of the beast. I mean, it can be interpreted that way. I mean, you can interpret it any way you want. But the point is, we have to stand up to this globalist cabal now. I mean, it is vast, it is monolithic, but it is not as big as all of us, all of humanity, if we decide to stand up. And stand up we need to do. So that's all for today. No music. I'm not going to play any music today. And hopefully I'll have another video shortly. Thank you very much.